If you're abducted by aliens, please do us a favor. Take something from the ship, record anything at all. Right? I mean, it's not illegal. Top 10 most famous abduction cases. Number 10. Antonio Villas Boas. Background. Antonio was a farmer and later in his life a lawyer. He was born in 1934 and died in 1991. He was 23 on the night of his abduction. The abduction. On a cold night in October 1957, Antonio was still working out in the fields since he preferred working out at night because during the day there was too much heat. While he was working, he said he witnessed a strange red light in the sky coming towards him. He said that it looked egg-shaped with a spinning top. Three legs came out of the spaceship as it landed on the field that he was working on. Antonio, terrified, fled to his tractor. He got inside, but the engine died shortly after. Possibly due to the presence of the UFO, he gets on his foot to run away. But he was soon seized by what he says was a 5 feet tall alien wearing overalls and a helmet. Aboard the craft, Antonio was stripped naked and covered in some sort of gel. He said that the aliens carried him through a doorway that had strange symbols on it, which he later memorized and drew. Inside the second room, the aliens took several blood samples from his chin. I guess chin blood is really important to the alien. Then, the room was filled with a very terrible gas, and Antonio was unconscious. It was then that the abduction took a strange and sensual turn. According to Antonio, an attractive female alien with large blue eyes, long white hair, and a small figure appeared in front of him, and the two of them had sex. Yep, like an avatar. I know. I don't even want to imagine what it would be like. When the deed was done, Antonio said that the female alien rubbed her belly, and then she pointed to the stars, indicating that she would raise their child in space. Of course, this irritated him terribly. He was then showed around the ship. To what purpose, I have no idea. He was then returned to Earth after the encounter he had with the female alien. Antonio stuck to his story until his death in 1991. Credibility. A lot of people point to the time of the abduction, which took place before the Barney and Betty Hill incident, as a sign that it was true. His story gathered media attention throughout the following years. Antonio said that this alien abduction truly happened, even until his death. I'm for one, am a bit unsure about the incident. It's very outlandish. It's wacky. Maybe it happened. Who knows? No witnesses. We just got his testimony for as a witness. We just have Antonio as a witness. So I give this about a 6 out of 10 on the credibility scale. I'm not completely closed off to the idea that this happened, but also it's very outlandish. Number 9. Thomas Reed. Reed is a retired entrepreneur and the founder of an international model and artist group. Reed has appeared in many TV series like Ancient Aliens and Encounters. He doesn't take pride in his accounts since he believes that the stories have tarnished his family's reputation. The abduction. Before the Berkshire abduction took place, it is reported that there have been many UFO sightings in the area. The abduction happened in 1969 in Berkshire. Thomas Reed recalls the evening being very hot and that the incident happened on the bridge, where they saw a round ball with lights firing out of the bottom of the huge craft. They say that they were pulled into the craft but remembered very little of the aftermath. Thomas said that two alien creatures looked like enormous ants, kind of like in Invincible season 2, and then his family was placed back into the car. His parents had swapped places and his mother, who never took the wheel, was sitting beside him. What's interesting is that Thomas Reed says that this isn't the first time that this that he was abducted. In 1966, he said that he and his brother were both inside their house when they saw lights and alien figures inside. They were then led into the woods and they were beamed up into the UFO. In 1967, it happened again. They heard doors in their house slamming as if it was haunted and later woke near the driveway from another trip inside the craft. As for the credibility of Thomas's Reed encounters, actually, I believe it. He seems credible. He has his brother as a witness, and his accounts does seem legit. He doesn't seem to have profited at all of this story, and I actually believe him. So I would put to him an 8 out of 10 on the credibility scale. I think this story is pretty legit. Number 8, Unintich. Frederick Unintch's abduction is one of the most famous and most disturbing ones, I think, on this list. The background. Frederick Valentich disappeared on October 21, 1978. He was a 20-year-old pilot at the time of his disappearance. He was never found. The abduction. According to the flight records, Valentich was flying a Cessna 102L light aircraft, and he was voyaging from Melbourne to King Island, a small island in Bass Strait. Frederick established contact with radio tower of Melbourne area at 7:12 p.m. and reported that he was being followed by another aircraft that was hovering about 1,000 feet above him. He also said that his engine wasn't working properly. The craft was described as diamond-shaped and having 4 bright lights underneath. Valentich. It's not a commercial airliner or anything. It's something else. It's about 1,000 feet above me. It's high-tech and moving at high speed. Valentich said that the craft hovered closer and closer to his airplane, and it's about 300 feet right now before he gets abducted, and it starts making a bizarre buzzing noise. Frederick is now having trouble controlling his aircraft. At 7:21, Valentich tells the tower that the craft was on top of him and that he was going into the light. This is where the transmission stops. Credibility. This is probably the most credible story in this video since Valentich was never found, neither was his aircraft. He completely disappeared, and this to me is one of the most terrifying alien abduction, because he was in his craft and he was followed and he then just vanished. I mean, I would be terrified. I give this story a 10 out of 10 on the credibility scale. I think it happened. It's very credible. Number 7. Charles Dickens and Calvin Parker Jr. Their backgrounds. Charles Dickens was 42 at the time of the abduction. He was well known by others in the community and handled the media better than Parker after the event. Parker was 19 years old when the abduction happened. He had just traveled to Pascagoula from an even smaller town. He was planning to save some extra money to get married at the time of the abduction. The abduction. On October 11, 1973, the boys were fishing on the banks of the Mississippi River. Parker was first distracted by blue lights that came near the surface of the water. And they initially thought that it was the light of a police car, but then they soon realized that it was something otherworldly. The two fishermen looked up to the skies and witnessed a large football-shaped craft descending from the heavens. The spaceship humanoid figures arrived, moving in the air towards the two men. Parker said that the beings had claws from hands and robot-looking eyes for mouths. One barely had a neck and was gray, while the others looked like they were females. The man said that the aliens grabbed their necks and with their claws, but the two of them did not fight back. They were taken to the crafts and they were experimented on. Hickson remembered a large machine-like eye moving over his body in the craft, and that they were surrounded by 5-foot-tall aliens. The two men later found themselves back on the riverbank as if nothing had happened. Hell, enough and I thought I've been through enough of a hell on this earth, and now I've got to go through something like this. But they could have, I guess they could have harmed us, son. They had use. They could have done anything to us. Credibility. The two men later went to the police and told them what happened. Of course, nobody believed them. They interrogated them both separately, and neither one diverged from the story they were telling. Overnight, the story went national. It was a media sensation. I, for one, find this story pretty credible, since they didn't seek attention, didn't try to profit of this, and they looked genuinely terrified about their encounter. A lot of people saw a UFO also on the night of their abduction. I put this 8 out of 10 on the credibility scale. I think it's very credible. The way they were witnesses that they said saw a UFO, and I think it's a very credible story. Number 6, Jesse Long. Background: Jesse Long comes from Tennessee. Long claims to have been abducted many times by aliens ever since he was 5 years old. The abduction. Jesse Long claims that the abduction started in 1957 in Rogersville, Tennessee. Jesse and his brother were playing behind his house and saw that what they thought was a weird house being built, but was actually a UFO. Then, according to Jesse, a tall man appeared to him and flashed him a bright light, which paralyzed him completely. Jesse did not remember the event until later when he underwent therapy sessions. He could feel them poking around in his leg. Jesse says that it was always painful in that area, in his tibia, and that he will have to wear his sock below. Jesse recalled through the sessions of being put on the table and an object being inserted into his left tibia. He also says that his brother was separated into another room. That object remained inside Jesse's leg for 34 years until 1991. He had an operation to remove it. The object appeared to be a shard made of glass. Jesse said that most of his abductions happened very similarly, and that the beings would take him through a corridor inside the shaft to a room and was paralyzed. He said they do different experiments on his body. And at age 12, they were taking sperm samples. And according to Jesse, they forced him to crossbreed with a female being. His encounters are closely related to Antonio, in the sense that Antonio also said that he was having intercourse with the aliens. So I guess there's credibility there that both men are saying the same thing. In 1990, Jesse Long was driving on a road to New Orleans when a light appeared in the sky and his car was lifted off into the air and he was brought inside the alien craft, still inside the vehicle. Jesse Long was then placed on a metal table and presented with an alien baby and told that this is your child. Not only that, Jesse recalls there were 9 others. I mean, how insane would that be? I think this is just an insane story, but that's what he says. That's what it says happened. For the credibility of this case, the object was analyzed at Southeast Research Institute and a materials analysis facility in Texas. The object had unique characteristics that could not be explained. While the story is outlandish, I think it really is. He does seem rather incredible when he tells his account, and while the object was real, who's to say none of this happened? Maybe it really did. He really did have intercourse with an alien, and he was abducted several times. Why him? Why him and not others? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I'd say I put this at the moment 7 out of 10 on the credibility scale. Jesse Long seems pretty credible in my opinion. Yeah, the way he recounts it, the way he's telling the story, he does sound pretty legit.
Jesse, when do you first recall being abducted?
My first abduction occurred in 1957 when I was 5 years old. in Rogersville, Tennessee, a very small town in Upper East Tennessee. My brother John was with me at the time. Above the hill behind our house, we came upon what appeared to be a round house under construction. And one man, a taller looking figure, he had a long rod in his hand. A light was emitted from it and we were paralyzed.
It is at this point that Jesse Long's conscious memory of what happened ends.
Number 5. Linda Napolitano. Background. Linda was an ordinary housewife that lived in New York City at the time of the abduction. On approximately 3:15 a.m. on a cold November morning in 1989, Linda recalls being asleep in her bed beside her husband and having strange beings beside her in the middle of the night. She starts feeling this numbness throughout her body. She was completely paralyzed. All of a sudden, a shining bright light went through her window. She says that 3 beings brought her in the craft in the form of levitation, traveling through the beam of light and through the walls. She is now floating above the city with the beings. Once aboard the craft, Linda says that she has been experimented on with even some that looked human in appearance. These are the Greys, the most recognizable alien beings that most of the abductees talk about the Greys being there when they are abducted. They're the ones responsible for most of the abductions. At this point, how terrified are you? I mean, you're being pulled into the craft with aliens. They're there. They're gonna experiment on you. Apparently, at this point in time, Linda is still paralyzed when she has been taken to a room and to a table. She's being levitated on the table. She still has her voice, however. One of them covered her mouth with his fingers for her not to scream. The beings then put an metal object in her nose. She immediately wakes up in her bed after that at about 5 p.m. She doesn't remember how she got to the craft, but she remembers being paralyzed and helpless in the craft. Linda goes to see a doctor and does some x-rays, and the doctor reveals a small metal-shaped implant in her nose. Credibility. Apparently, 24 witnesses saw the craft that night. That's a lot of witnesses that saw Linda being pulled into the beam of light. There's also something in her nose when you look at her real x-ray image. She also claims to be abducted a second time, and when she went back to the doctor after that, the metal implant is gone from her nose. I think this story is pretty kind of credible. It's very terrifying, and you never want to be in her situation. But I find it to be pretty credible. So I would put this story an 8 out of 10 on the credibility scale. I think she's telling the truth. Number 4, Amy Rylance. Background. Amy Rylance is married and lives in Australia, in the small Queensland town of Gondia, which is next to Tiaro. She was 22 at the time of her abduction. She is married with her husband, Keith Rylance, age 39. Amy Rylance claimed to have been abducted in 2001 in Australia. Amy said that she was allegedly beamed up by a bright light to an otherworldly craft. She remembers being treated and experimented on aboard the craft, but claims that she has been treated well also by the beings. She was then dropped off 300 miles away from where the abduction took place 3 hours later. Amy claimed that no one can explain how she was taken from Maryborough and ended up in Mackay, a distance of 800 kilometers, which is impossible to be done by driving alone. Credibility. Her friend Petra was also in the house that night and is said to have witnessed the event, also with her husband, with Amy's husband, which does put some weight to this story. There was also a burning bush and a ripped curtain at the window. But again, they could have easily done that. So I don't think they're lying per se, but I don't know enough about this story to say whether or not I'm fully convinced that this happened. But the long distance that she was taken to does raise an eyebrow. So I would put this 6 out of 10 on the credibility scale. I did not find a lot of information of what was done to Amy inside the craft, which I found was weird. All of these cases, by the way, I noticed that while I was searching Google, I could not find a lot of information about the abductions. That just seems weird because a lot of people do claim that they have had experiences. So yeah, I find it weird that I can't find much on abductions on Google. Maybe I'm not looking right. Number 3, Matthew Roberts. Background: Matthew Roberts was a cryptologist in the Navy for 16 years. He was stationed on board the USS Theodore Roosevelt during the Gimbal encounter event. Matthew Roberts wrote a book about his experiences with the abduction phenomenon. Robert felt like it was his duty to talk about his experiences. Robert said that he has had several weird instances of what he thought were nightmares at first. He had no belief in alien beings from outer space before his abductions. He said that he has had numerous encounters with different kinds of species, and that one was small and that had huge goggles on, and they looked like small gnomes, like garden gnomes, and that even had a beard. Now, I'm not sure what the other species are, but I'm sure like the Greys are probably part of his experiences as well. He said that numerous times he's awakened to them in his bedroom next to his bed. I mean, how terrifying would that be? He even felt a hand touch his arm, and as Robert tried to close his eyes with his hand, he realized he couldn't move. Robert talks about his experience seeing the gimbal video and that he knew other things were out there. He says that there is enough footage to convince everyone that these crafts are not ours. These UFOs are very real, Robert says, but what is your idea of reality? That's the question. This is a great big secret, he continues. Nothing I am saying is anything new. It's just a matter of, are you going to believe it or not? Credibility. To me, Matthew Roberts is very credible since he has been in the military and has no reason to lie about his abduction. He appears in Encounters, the Netflix series, and I found his interview extremely credible. You can watch the series on Netflix. It's a great alien UFO documentary. And he was also 4 years away of retirement before he decided to leave his career because of the phenomenon he was experiencing, and he had to talk about it. And I mean, to me, Matthew Roberts is one of the most credible guys out there, vouching that we are not alone, that these things are out there, they're real. Like he says, what is your idea of reality? Number 2, Travis Walton. He was reported being missing for 5 days before finally being found. His story has been told in numerous documentaries and even the movie called Fire in the Sky, which doesn't completely follow Travis's account, but I still enjoyed the movie, even though the ending is completely changed and completely ignores his what really happened to him. The abduction. On November 5, 1975, Walton and 7 other crew members are getting ready to leave work for the night. They drive a bit away on the road when they all see a bright light on to their right. When they get closer, they see a saucer coming down at about 20 feet above the clearing. Travis gets out of the car, goes to the saucer, and is abducted. Travis Walton tells that when he regained consciousness, it wasn't real quick, it was slow and dim. He felt like he was dying, and when he laid eyes on the aliens, he was panicking. I believed I was in a hospital. I was in a lot of pain, and as I became more conscious, I looked around and I saw alien beings. I panicked. Travis also says that the alien pictures Hollywood makes doesn't help either. He was terrified. Didn't help knowing that most of the aliens were evil. Travis says that he was lying on his back on a metal table. There were 3 alien beings around him. There was a light above him, and it wasn't really bright, like a soft glow. He says that he lashed out at them, and he pushed one easily since these beings were very small. He also described them as greys, small 5 feet tall beings with big eyes, large heads, and small arms. He says that there was a doorway at the other side of the beings. He also said that they didn't speak and had no expressions. They were probably talking to each other telepathically. He says that their lack of reaction also added to his panic. He doesn't remember being fed and doesn't remember much of the 5 days. He was conscious after only a couple of hours in the craft and after being experimented on. He says that it was the most terrifying event of his life. He was catatonic for weeks after it happened. He doesn't believe that the aliens are evil and that it was kind of them to turn him to Earth. He says he lost weight during that time, 10 or 12 pounds. Credibility. For me personally, I don't believe Travis Walton. There's a chance that it happened, but it is reported heavily that he was a UFO nut before his disappearance. And his mother, who talked to the sheriff when he disappeared, did not seem to worry about Walton at all when he went missing. And there's a report that he also told his mother not to worry if he was being abducted by extraterrestrials. Of course, it could have still happened. That doesn't mean that Travis was lying completely. But for me, right now, I don't believe him per se. I rate this incident a 5 out of 10 on the credibility scale, just because it seems, when you hear him talk also, he doesn't seem like he knows like exactly what he's about to say. He pauses a lot. I don't find him all that credible. It's just one. I just think that Travis Walton might be lying, and for me, he's the only one on this list that I'm mostly unsure about. Of course, it could have still happened. That doesn't mean that Travis was lying completely. But for me, right now, I don't believe him per se. I rate this incident a 5 out of 10 on the credibility scale, just because it seems, when you hear him talk also, he doesn't seem like he knows like exactly what he's about to say. He pauses a lot. I don't find him all that credible. It's just one. I just think that Travis Walton might be lying, and for me, he's the only one on this list that I'm mostly unsure about. So yeah, that's what I think about Travis Walton.
What do you remember from that moment on?
When I regained consciousness, it wasn't real quick. It wasn't real walking right up. It was real slow. It was dim. My consciousness was kind of like in and out for a while. I didn't know where I was. The pain and the feeling that I was mortally wounded, something was so wrong inside. I felt like I was dying. And this is what really fueled the panic when I finally laid eyes on these creatures. Of course, all of the mental programming that we get from Hollywood that aliens are invading monsters, didn't help. But I instantly associated this feeling of dying with pain with them. So I was combative immediately.
Where were you?
I was lying on my back on a raised table. There was a light above me. It was not real bright. It was not so bright that I couldn't, see the outline of the fixture. But
What did the fixture look like?
kind of like that, only much larger. Just a soft glow. And in the movie, there's a little bit of striking on the part of the aliens against me. That didn't happen. I lashed out at them. The one closest to me, I felt really weak. I didn't have enough strength to do much. So when my arm contacted him, he just fell back very unexpectedly easy into the other one. And I rolled off the table in the other direction. And they came around the table, and the three of them were coming towards me. And I just grabbed something from behind me, an object off of the shelf there, and started swinging it at them.
What was the object?
It was just some large, long cylinder or rod, glass, some clear material. I wasn't studying it. I was looking at them and swinging wildly, screaming threats. They stopped. And I was planning on attacking more fully, just making way past them. The only doorway I could see was on the other side of them.
And it looked like a doorway?
Yeah, it looked like a doorway, just,
And what did they look like?
I guess it's a pretty typical description nowadays. Very large eyes, hairless, two eyes, nose, mouth. I didn't see them speak or no change in the expressions.
Number 1. Betty and Barney Hill incident. This is where it all began. The original alien abduction, and arguably the most famous. Betty and Barney Hill were an interracial couple in the 1960s, and they both claimed to have been abducted. They were driving from Canada to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, back from their honeymoon, shortly before midnight on September 19, 1961. And then it happened. Both witnessed something otherworldly, both had missing time, and both of them were abducted. Their backgrounds. Barney Hill was a postal worker while his wife, Betty, was a social worker. They were both extremely active in the civil rights movement. They were an interracial couple, which was extremely rare during those times, and Betty and Barney Hill have done numerous therapy sessions in order to recall the incident to their best of their abilities. The abduction. The abduction is said to have happened at 10:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, where Betty Hill mentioned that she saw a bright light appear below the moon and the planet Jupiter. While Barney drove on US Route 3, Betty thought she was witnessing a falling star, except that the star did not fall. It was moving upward into the black sky. Barney took some binoculars and realized that the object was an aircraft and that the plane was not actually a plane. It looked as flat as a pancake. They continued driving through the dark road, and about 1 mile south of an Indian range, the object rapidly descended towards the car. They stopped the vehicle and got out of the aircraft. The huge silent craft hovered above them at about 80 to 100 feet. Using his binoculars, Barney saw 8 to 10 humanoid figures in the aircraft windows. This is now an encounter of the third kind, where the witnesses see not only the craft but beings on board. Barney is hearing messages as if the aliens are telling him that they are here for them, just as red lights appeared on each side of the craft. Barney ran back to his car, telling his wife that the aliens were going to abduct them. Barney and Betty are now driving as fast as they can away from the otherworldly craft. Suddenly, They both feel a tingling sensation back inside the vehicle, and then silence. The trip back home ended in the morning, and they returned missing everything that happened that night. It took them several days and a few therapy sessions later to remember what happened. They said that the alien being stopped them in the middle of the road. They remember being taken into a large craft. The hills were separated in the ship to perform various and multiple tests. And we turned off, and 30 miles south, they were standing in the middle of a road blocking our way. Stopped the car, got out, took us through the path in the woods where the craft was on the ground. The beings took tissue samples from their mouths and even did a pregnancy test to Betty with the long needle. Barney remembered having a cup attached to his groin. They took semen samples for Barney. Betty says that she had a long conversation with one of the beings. It is unclear if this means actual speech or telepathic speech, but I'm pretty sure it would be telepathic. During their ordeal on the craft, Betty even said she saw a star map, and she said to have witnessed some shocking details of the cosmos. Under hypnosis, Betty was able to redraw the star map she saw on the craft. According to a teacher called Marjorie Fish, the map perfectly Zeta Reticuli star system. The same map that Bob Lazar said, the same part of the galaxy that Bob Lazar said that the UFO he worked on came from. Coincidence? Credibility. I think that Barney and Betty are credible people. They both were working very hard in the civil rights movement, and they were good people, not looking for attention. The New Hampshire state also made like a huge plaque where the abduction happened, so the state acknowledges their abduction. While it doesn't really mean anything, I think it's cool. I would put this incident at 8 out of 10 on the credibility scale. I think it's very credible that they were abducted that night, and of all the things that Betty saw, she said she saw in Barney as well. Yeah, I think they are very credible people. Please like and subscribe. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you thought about the top 10, or what is your favorite. Let me know what is your favorite abduction story, and see you next time. Bye.